The James Hardy Fruit Machine channel. Honestly, it's dead average. There'll no doubt be some Cloud9 or Blue Moon, maybe a barcode on King Kebab if you're lucky. There'll be plenty of cups of tea and ripping the piss out of Just Winter. Anyway, stop waffling, go and grab a brew, put your knacker cracker away, and watch the pigging video. Harsh. Very harsh.
Right, so congratulations if you're still listening in part 2. What I'm going to cover, I guess, now is life on the road and I guess my close group of people that I slotted with and some of my experiences, hopefully like some of the more interesting stories. It's very hard to not, I guess, accidentally go over old ground by mistake. Having done a video that lasted 40 minutes, Winter says is too long. You're probably going to sort of actively go to a different part of slotting and, you know, and my experiences to try and avoid kind of going through stuff for a second time. It's, I guess, more of an insight now into what happened next and where I kind of ended up. So having got a couple of tricks and found that, you know, that kind of part of my slotting journey, things do open up for you. And I think I'll start with the road. So I touched on in the first video, it is quite a lonely place. The only people that tend to go into services, at least at night times, are either complete nutcases, truckers that are obviously working late night, and then people going into services for a piss, and then a few thieves and stuff like that. You do get a few dodge people, but I guess generally speaking, they're very desolate places at night, services. And I know these days to shut the arcades off. In the days when I was out on the road, certainly from gonna say maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, they were open 24/7. They didn't very rarely shutter services at night or shut the arcade. There was one or two examples of me going into the services that were shut, as in they had a like kind of thing down over the front of it, and it was short, but it few and far between. This is not a regular thing. It was a very, very infrequent thing, and it made life easy to go for a gamble and to be able to literally work 24/7. And I guess the first person I went on the road with, say, full time, was my mate Pete from Carlisle, and I'd touched on we used to meet up at. Sometimes he'd drive to mine, so sometimes he would drive down to Manchester and we'd just leave a car in Manchester. Other times we would meet out on the M6 somewhere, and then variably that would be Forton, which is sort of Lancaster. And yeah, I mean, that's where the trick started of leaving a car in the petrol station. So the petrol station at Forton southbound had its own little car park. It was just a tarmac bit, and it wasn't on the main car park. And in them days, you didn't have to worry about staying on. There was no ANPR. You didn't have to worry about how long you stayed there for. You know, there were signs up telling you not to stay for like more than 3 hours and stuff, but we weren't enforced. There was nothing to really worry about, to be completely honest. And we found somewhere that worked, which was just park. You looked like you were one of the staff at the petrol station on Forton, and that was it. Away we went. And those were the days where we had bookies in them. Like there were, I think there was Ladbrokes in Forton. And yeah, I mean, a lot of them had bookmakers in. I don't know if they still do, to be honest with you. I very rarely stop at a service area anymore. So yeah, I mean, they were different. It's certainly a different world, I guess, to the world we live in now. And in terms of what we did when me and Pete started going down the road, we very much were, I say, indiscriminate to a point. And when I say to a point, if somebody just blew in something for no reason, you'd stand your own blows. You genuinely, if you were going to play some bag of shit and blow a load of money in it and for no reason, then you'd have to have had a good reason to do it, or you would pay for your blow. And to be honest with you, that made me almost stupidly disciplined, like beyond disciplined. And what it meant is I tended to stick to things I knew I was going to make money off, was going to make a quick pinch. I didn't try and get involved in too much, and we try to be relatively clever. Although it's hard to be totally clever when you're indiscriminate and you're taking everything on, because we wouldn't take everything on, and we would be, we would, if we thought something wasn't right, we obviously had refill keys. So I mean, we did know roughly if a machine had been absolutely leathered, we'd know, we'd genuinely be able to tell that it had no money in it, and we'd stay clear of it. So I mean, we would be to a point sort of in control of what we were doing, but we would, if it was anything that was profitable, we'd play it, and that's kind of different from Just, for example, who he travelled the country and did services, and he would literally just play cash tax. They would literally just play that one machine, and he was that driven to just do one specific machine that he would just play that. Whereas we weren't quite the same. We would play little bits of everything, and it would take us longer to get around the service area than it would him to get around the service area, because he was literally just going in for one thing, getting down to the next place. And a lot of it, when I do touch on me and him driving around the country and him going, well, that never had anything for me. And I was like, oh, you're joking, that's great services. We used to play this. But we had a wider range. I think that's probably the way to put it. And I guess our experiences are going to be different. And to say that we did the services, we did jib off into towns. I mean, me and Pete always went into Crewe. Crewe was always good to us. We occasionally went into places like Stoke, although I didn't particularly like Stoke. But we would go into places. We did bob into Stafford. We had a few bits down there. And when we were on the M6 specifically, like, we would go into towns, sort of dotted all the way down the M6, and jet off the motorway, especially in the daytime, because we knew that the arcades were there at night. And if we'd bumped into other players, which we did bump into other players, we weren't the only people travelling around doing service stations. We'd change focus. Often if we walked into somewhere, we recognised people in there slotting, we'd kind of try and figure out which way they were going and try and get ahead of them by services or two. And we'd go out of our way to kill everything. That's just the way we were. And we would try and sometimes if we knew people had been, somewhere we were going, we'd switch onto a different motorway. And we'd do a lot of second guessing of where people were and what they were doing. But it worked for us, and we tried to stay on top of stuff to a point. But I mean, you can't stay. It's impossible to stay on top of stuff. But if we were going round and we let's say a route down the M6, maybe onto the M5, 42, 40, across the 4, maybe around the 25, or back up the 1, across the 62, and then make a decision whether we're going round again, like these things happened. Or we'd do 2 days and be away 2 days, and we'd look at each other and be like, right, we've done enough, we're both knackered, and we'd go home, have a day at home or whatever. And I might go again, I might not. We would sometimes do it twice a week. We'd sometimes do 3 days, 4 days. It just depended on what we had and the motivation to go and do it. And I guess the other thing for me is that when you're bumping into people, you do network. And network's probably the way of putting it. And considering I was online in the early days of online, and that's how I'd met a lot of the people I started gambling with, you were meeting a lot of people who you didn't know from online, travelling the country. And I know this is going to sound mad for somebody who's got a YouTube channel and talks a lot, but if you go back to me as, I guess, a slotter when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, around that sort of, early 20s. I was so hyper-focused on the machines that you'd come into a services, like another slotter would come in, recognise us, come over and have a chat. And I might say hi, but that'd be it. I would just carry on doing what I was doing. I would genuinely just continue to do what I was doing, and whoever I was slotting with, I mean, generally it was Pete. He would have the chat with people. He would acquire the phone number. He would communicate with them. And because I was so focused on what I was doing, I didn't really bother. I know, obviously, I was meeting people through online, and I already had a little bit of a network at this point anyway, of people that I slotted with, that I knew, and that shared information with. That little group of people that I guess I trusted and kind of to a point stayed away from their areas and vice versa. Because I had that little group, that's kind of all I felt I needed. Not that people didn't have valuable information, didn't have things that I didn't have, and there's I can point to so many tricks that people will have made a shit load of money out of that I didn't know about. Loads of stuff, and nobody knew everything. I don't care who you are, and it doesn't matter how well connected you are, you won't get everything, and you didn't get everything. It was as simple as that, and you almost had to accept that, because there was that much stuff of those years. There was that many tricks, there was that many empties, and a new one came along so frequently, and you could either be very, very fortunate and you'd get onto stuff early doors and make some good money out of it, or you'd find out with everybody else, and it's the Chinese whispers would start, and it's like, oh, there's a trick on this, there's a trick on that. And some of those tricks I got early, some of them I didn't. I didn't get everything at the start. I was very fortunate with some of the things that I did get at the start, because they were massively profitable. They really were profitable, and you could make a lot of money out of some of the tricks. And I remember Road Chef had a rebrand at one point, and when it had its rebrand, they put the same machines in every single services up and down the country. And I can't remember all of the games that they put into them, but what I will tell you is, like, for example, every single Road Chef, pretty much from somewhere down in the southwest in the middle of nowhere all the way up to somewhere at the top of the country, they all had a golden dragon in. They always had a golden dragon, not necessarily both sides, but they would have at least have one, if not two. They all had a giant gems in, if not both sides again. There were other things that they'd have, like random shit, like a bottle bank or something. They always generally have the same, pretty much. It was like when whoever was their supplier at the time, it might have been Games Tech, can't remember, whoever their supplier at the time, I just had a blueprint of what's put in every single Road Chef, and they're all the same games. Now, for us, like a Golden Dragon, obviously in every services was great news. And again, to pinpoint, we had the Vivid trick very, very early. Really, really early. Don't know how that came about, how we got it, but we did have it very, very early, before all of the so-called, and I call them Vivid Pros, started, because Vivid was a good and a bad thing. It went from, I guess, it being quite underground and very few people to loads of people. Went from being casuals to thinking they were players, or becoming, doing it more frequently, and it grew. It grew. Fruit Machine players as a group from a very small number of people, or what felt like a small number of people, because there weren't as many people and the message boards were quiet, to loads and loads of people because of Vivids. And I remember quite clearly, like we saw a Vivid early doors, at the time, and we did every single one. Like, there was no ifs, no buts, no maybes. And if you take one on, let's say, in a retro that's unchipped, you're probably not going to make much money on it. You're probably going to break even if it's good, and you're probably going to lose. I mean, our best results we had was the one in Palm, where we did manage to get. I never got a ton on video, but I did get a couple of 75s. Me and just got a couple of 75s, and they were profitable. Like they were really, really profitable. And then eventually you get to the point when there's that many people doing them that you're just chasing each other's money, and it becomes almost like a retro, because you're just doing it for nostalgia. Let's be honest. The only reason you're taking one on is purely for nostalgia. And they were boring to play. They weren't great. They were people in the industry I used to speak to back then. You described them as very flat profile, and what they mean by flat profile is they're very progressive, and it's very predictable, and it's very boring to play, and it wasn't good for the casual. There was no mystique to them really in terms of how they played. They weren't great games, but they were a good source of income. We had a lot of in services. We had a lot of tons back in the early days when they first sort of came out, and they were all right. They were certainly something we would have played, and then later on it became worth taking them on in pubs, and you could get them done pretty quick. You didn't have to mess about with them for very long. I mean, you can literally just reverse and speed up the process really, really quickly, but they weren't great. As time went on, and it was purely because you were just chasing everybody else. So yeah, we had that, and said I played up and down the motorways, and we did go everywhere, and we did drop into towns down south, or all over the country really. We were everywhere, and you'd just stumble across good areas and things that felt untouched, and sometimes it wasn't that it was untouched, it was more that people weren't doing the tricks you were doing, and you'd almost fall lucky, I guess, that you'd go somewhere and you'd end up playing something that other people just didn't know that trick, I guess. And it were good, I think, for us to all do different things. And when people say, I guess almost flippantly, oh well, there was loads of tricks, loads of profit, loads of stuff to do, and there was a bit for everybody. You could literally walk a town, and if you did something different to everybody else, it didn't really matter that other people had been. I guess that was where we were at. In terms of, I guess, going back to our little group, people I knock around with, in some case slotted with, met up with. There weren't loads of us, but we all knew each other. I mean, my core group of friends are the people that I knew were best, and those people to me were our little group. I never fell out with any of them. They all fell out with each other at times. I mean, but I never fell out with any of them, and I was always youngest. Seems weird when you're in your like 40s and you're going, I was the youngest, but I was absolutely the youngest. I was the baby of the group, and I think I got afforded way more than everybody else in terms of what I said and did. Plus, I'm not exactly backwards in coming forwards. If I got something to say, I'll just say it. So, they all looked after me because I was the youngest, and yet, I knocked around with some very, very talented slotters who were very, very good at what they did. But I guess as a group, we were all pretty loyal to each other as well, which is nice. Although by no means did we share everything. We definitely didn't share everything. We didn't share every trick. I mean, John and Just travelled the country doing Golden Games. John worked out the trick and just refined it, I guess. And there's got to be a level of that within people that you slot with, because we all see things that other people don't see. And I would say quite a few of us we're on a spectrum somewhere. We do improve tricks and change them. Yeah, I didn't work out lock and load. Matt worked out lock and load on test. I didn't work it out. I slotted a bit with Matt in the early days, and he 100% worked out that trick. It's not mine, but what I did and what Pete did with me, because me and Pete toured the country for him, and pretty much slotted them full time, but we refined it, we improved it, we changed it, and I've heard of people just said to me, I watched somebody do a lock and load, and all they did was literally push the gamble out, and I was like, that'll take ages, and it doesn't always come quickly, and they play better when they're dead than when they're alive as well, and we did refine it, we did change it. People who've watched me play it, I do understand the machine, and I still remember the first. There's a great story behind it all. That on the Arcadia message board, somebody from claiming to be from LeisureLink, probably was, I don't know, actually posted something up about locations for lock and load, and said, I know where they all are. They're all in our depot in, I think it was Warrington area. They're all in our depot and they ain't coming out. And I remember playing the first rechipped one I ever played, and I knew there was something wrong straight away. I walked into Knutsford on the northbound side, and obviously the first machine I went on was lock and load. Bearing in mind, we've had this for a good deal of time, a really good deal of time by this point. And I went onto it, and it held for a bonus straight away. And I looked at Pete and I went, they've chipped this. Either somebody has done a ridiculous amount of money into this machine, or they've chipped it, because it held for a bonus. And yeah, lo and behold, I could tell as soon as I started gambling that it wasn't, there was no pause there, and I hadn't even twigged about the coin payout at this point, but I knew straight away if it chipped it. I mean, you've been doing something for so long, and something's not right, you just know, instinctively, you just know that's been rechipped. And yeah, it had been, sadly, rechipped, and I still think I took about 80-90 quid out of it, just because it had been ram cleared, and I took it down to not holding. And people have claimed you can empty the rechip. It is possible, but it would be incredibly hard, because a lot of your boards you're only getting a tenner, and they do clam up. You're not getting 25 quids. And anyone who's played the unchipped 15 on the emulator, they're really hard work, and they're actually very, very difficult to empty, despite the fact that your gamble's not blocked. So yeah, very, very difficult to do, and it is probably possible to occasionally empty them as a rechip. I think I managed it on mine once, but it will going to start clamming back the money eventually, and there's not a lot you can do about it. You just have to kind of accept it, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I remember that day wasn't a red letter day for me. That was a sort of sad end, I guess, in the fact that it finally been rechipped. And, as I said, I touched on the fact I used to travel as far as Winchester services, which had one each side. Some places it didn't last long for, other places it lasted longer for. Yeah, I guess it just depended who else was doing them, because obviously other people were figuring it out and finding it out and doing it by that point. And I didn't. Let me be honest with you. I mean, I didn't often go to them sealed. You'd go to the odd one that had sort of 50-60 quid in it still, and it doesn't streak. So I mean, it's one of them that somebody's had to have had a go at it, and either it had money back through it, or somebody had just had enough of doing it slightly wrong, I guess, and then just given up and left the rest for us. And then we'd just take the rest out of it, and then we'd leave it just off CL. And that was kind of the way where we were with it. We did travel about a bit. We did play them everywhere, and you got a feel for it. We had the odd arcade here and there, Adam. But they were not as easy. Bookmakers were a really good source of them because I've touched on in the first video. William Mills had 250 hoppers, and same as Gold Strike. So we would go and take on the noties that were in there. A lot of the services didn't have noties in, but they were in a lot. It was, considering it's not, I don't think it was a massive release. We did seem to find them in quite a lot of the services, which was quite nice. Weirdly, not really in many truck stops. So I mean, like, we'd go. There's a few truckies we used to go to, and they're dotted all over the M6. There's a few, and A1 there's a few, and they're kind of just everywhere, really. Like, if you look on maps, you'd see there's quite a few truckies, but we weren't really good for things like lock and load. We had other stuff. There's one near Lancaster, and that had a clowning around in. We used to go and sit and do that on the night, or I did, from time to time. And, the good thing about a truck stop was that, in the main, people didn't go to them. Said Lim being probably the one that we found got battered the most. I mean, I never forget, there was Red Gaming, I can't even tell you which Red Gaming it was, and it had one in the arcade in Lim, and it had a trucker's pub upstairs. Pete was determined, he did look a bit like a trucker, he was determined he would go and doing the one upstairs, so we went upstairs and did it, and we went upstairs, and I can't remember, you had to sign in or something. We managed to blag our way in and got a drink each, and did the red. It was absolutely flying off its tits, and we got 75 quid out of it in about, I don't know, 5 minutes, if that. And obviously the daggers of all the truckies that were looking at you. It was quite funny looking back now, but they were not happy about us being there, because obviously we weren't truckers, and we didn't bother with that place again. I don't think we just stuck to downstairs afterwards. But the one at Wolverhampton had it was either a Fruitopia or a Cash Raker. I think it's Fruitopia it had in there. We sit on that one sometimes. But most of the truckers couldn't play machines, or they weren't very good at them. And there was always life. They always had money to spend. And they were always rich pickings. You'd go into that one at Wolverhampton and it only had 5 or 6 machines, and we'd always stop and have a bit of food while we were there. Like, normally we'd get like a breakfast early doors, but the people that frequented them, they'd slot alongside you. They wouldn't even really pay much attention to you. They didn't really care that you were there or whatever else. We'd pull up in a car and park in the car park when all lorries were there, but they'd just slot, and they'd just fill machines up, and it was just such an easy source of income for us. It was just dead easy because the machines were generally flying. Didn't really matter that they were on low percentage, because they played so badly all the time that we'd just jet on them and make our money, and we'd be gone in half an hour. But we'd always stop there, and it was always a good booster to the profit. I mean, Pete used to smoke like crazy. God knows how much it cost me in cigarettes over the years, but he used to smoke like crazy, and I didn't smoke, so we'd always have to stop and get a pack of fags and whatever else. But I mean, back in them days, fuel was dirt cheap. It didn't cost us anything to get around the country, and we did all right. It was good. When we treated ourselves, like we'd treat ourselves to like a hotel room for the night, and a lot of the time, we'd just have a couple of hours in car, and he had a Beamer, and it was well uncomfy to sleep in, but we used to sleep in that a lot, and just grab a few hours. And the thing that always, like, I know you've got 24-hour McDonald's now, you didn't do in them days, but we would, in the morning, wherever we were, we'd go and make a beeline to the nearest McDonald's, and we get a double sausage and egg meal, and it was like somebody had fed you a load of drugs. You went from being drowsy, tired, half dead because you'd been out all night, your eyes were hurting, and just ping, you were wide awake. A double sausage and egg meal with a bit of ketchup on it, and a brew. And honestly, like, you'd go from being dead, out on your feet, knackered, to just being wide awake. and it's horrible. Sunrise is horrible when you've been out all night and you've not slept. And also, I'll tell you what, your skills go downhill like no end. Things that seem easy to you and mundane and everyday, it turns into like a skill continue level 4. It's just flying up, and you're like, shit. But everything goes from being so simple and easy and running a mill to you having to put so much concentration into stuff. You make more mistakes. It's very hard to explain until you've done it, but starve yourself asleep for a day or two and then go to a retro and play some machines, and that's what it was like all the time for us. It was so painful. I guess there's loads of funny services stories that I've got from people begging you for a fiver because they've run out of fuel, even though they're blatantly just on the scam. I never forget trowel services on the M1. I used to call it T-trowel, obviously, play on words on that. But it was, we dubbed it like the £5 services. Eventually it did change its ways, but when I started going down the roads, everything in there, it was all like Psycho-Cast Beasts and Arabian Nights and that sort of stuff. I think I couldn't tell you all the machines that I had. I genuinely wouldn't know. There might have been Champ Soccers and that in there, all on £5, and it was like there was no over 18s, and the southbound carriageway side was the bigger side, and the machines were all sort of sprawled sort of near the door, and it was quite a long area, but it had quite a few machines in. And then the northbound side was dead small, and it only had a few machines in. And when they finally got rid of the £5 and they put proper machines, 25 quiders or 15s or whatever they put in, can't even remember, they never changed that small side. It was always still tiny, it was always still small. And the southbound side, I think they did revamp it. But I think the first time we ever went, I think we just got lucky, and I can't even remember who I was slotting with. I've got a feeling it was Matt, actually. And I think we made like a oneer out of it. I don't even know why we bothered staying, because it was blatantly obvious it was full of £5. And we're mainly bar crests, and £5 bar crests on low percentages are generally a bad idea. Don't care what you say. I mean, there's like probably a couple of BWBs like Volcano and stuff in there as well, I seem to recall. I mean, it's really testing my memory, but I don't even know why we bothered staying. But we ended up slotting it, and we ended up making nearly £100. And it never happened again, I don't think, in that services when it went £5 in. But it was a right weird old services. It was mental. And I can't think it probably did have a few half decent things, but it was never, once it'd gone to 25, it was never really any good. I know Bucket mentioned bumping into a female player, and ironically we bumped into the same woman in the same services. Don't know how many years apart. I doubt it. I would have bumped into her probably first, but Leicester Forest East. Can't even remember. There was a few decent bits in Leicester Forest over the years, but there was also a lot of crap. I think the Midlands were never great. Some were better than others in the Midlands. Norton Keynes was always good because players, if did travel, generally begrudged paying to go on there. So Norton Keynes was always a good little stop. We did pretty well in there. That's where we won. Me and Ross won a TV. Well, Ross won a TV. I was too busy slotting, and he decided to put a pound in it was a grabber or whatever, some sort of skill game. And he ended up winning a TV, which would obviously be like a portable TV tuning thing. And we never, ever got the TV. He won it, and it didn't drop out. It got stuck in the thing. And I remember he was so determined he wanted this TV because we could watch TV in car on all 5 channels or 4 channels, whatever you got. I don't think you even got channel 5 most of the time. He put his details in and never gave it us. We went back a couple of times after and asked about it in the shop, and they were like, just played dumb. So he never got his crap TV, which was a shame. But he won it off £1. That was an interesting one. Interesting story. Very disappointing. He was so chuffed he won it as well. But LeisureLink or whoever it were, and Games Tech, LeisureLink, whoever it would have been, ripped him off for his TV. weren't the first or the last time. I mean, I remember, God knows how much these services have owed us over the years. It's frightening. But if anybody back in them days used to ever claim non-payouts, because we did claim some of them, if you were lucky enough to get them, and I did get some, I didn't get all of them, but nowhere near. But if I did get them, the way that they would pay it would be in something called postal orders, and anybody who's younger will go, what the fuck is a postal order? Postal order is like a little sort of thing that you could take down to the post office and they'd exchange it back for money for you. So what you do is you leave all your details, how much the machine owed you, and the grand scheme of it was you very rarely saw anything, and then every so often, if you were very lucky, a postal order turned up for either all or some of the money they owed you. You could never keep track of it because you didn't know how much you were bloody owed. And who was paying you, which service, because you very rarely got detail of it. Sometimes you got like a little printed slip that came with it to give you an idea of which services it was. But half the time, the engineers just pocketed it. I think more than half the time, they just pocketed it. And you ended up, sadly, with absolutely sweet FA. And they knew full well most people weren't going to come back for the sake of 20 quid. One of our regular tricks as well, it was for multiple reasons, was if we went into a services at night and a machine was turned off, we would turn it back on. Every time. And in the early days of noties, when you turned it back on, the amount of times it spat a 10 or a £20 note at you when you turned it on was unreal. So, I mean, we probably got some of the money back that way that we'd lost. But also, I don't know how commonplace and common knowledge it was, but people often turned off the fruit machine when they'd done their bollocks in on it and were planning to come back the next day. So they literally just unplugged the machine and left the machine unplugged with a view that they were going to come back a day later and hope it was still turned off. So, I mean, yeah, we found a lot of machines with absolutely nothing wrong with them, full, absolutely off their boxes because people had turned them off. And that happened quite a lot. It was a fairly frequent one. I mean, turning them on and finding a 10 or £20 note was also pretty frequent. But that happened a lot. We were pretty fortunate with that sort of stuff. Once we'd learnt the script, these things happened and people did stuff like that. We were kind of on it, I would say. And we'd always check. It was always in our best interest to check it and see what was going on. So that pretty much takes you around the services. I guess one last story, because I'm kind of approaching 40 minutes and I'm going to stop, was when me and Pete went down to ATI one year at London, and my missus came down, and him and my missus ended up, I was knackered. We'd been out slotting for a day before we decided to go, and this again was when I was guest of Empire. And we used to literally go with Empire on our tickets to get in, whereas a lot of people just signed up with bogus businesses and stuff. Anyway, so he went in. There was an Ultimo in, I think, Toddington on the M1, southbound, and he go, right, I'm going doing the Ultimo. I was like, right, I'm getting some kip. I'm absolutely knackered, and I just lay in the car and went to sleep. And my missus obviously didn't want to listen to me snoring, so she went in and stood with Pete while Pete went and did the Ultimo. And I slept I felt very refreshed when I woke up. I slept for a full 6 hours while he was doing it, because it gave him a fucking real hard time. And he'd obviously just been run and refilled since he went on it, and he got there eventually. He got there with every single one he ever took on, but it could just be time consuming, and he got it at the worst possible state just after it had been run, and he was on it on low percentage for 6 hours to empty it, and he got there eventually. But yeah, he stood there, and I had a very good night's sleep for once, so that was quite nice. I guess I'll leave it at that for the second part, because I've rambled on for long enough, but I hope you've enjoyed listening to some of the experiences, and I will come back with a bit more, I guess, in the next part. Thanks for watching.